Now that I've had another epidural, I know that my first one did not work. I'm like, yeah, I'm probably having this baby tomorrow. Sorry, TMI, but like, this is a pregnancy video. Breastfeeding makes me so hungry. Is that a saying? I think 0 to 100 real quick. Hey guys, and welcome to today's video. So today I'm finally doing my postpartum update. So if you are new to my channel, I recently had a baby about 3.5 months ago, actually almost 4 months ago. So throughout my pregnancy here on my channel, I did kind of like get ready with me, and I updated you on my pregnancy throughout, shared my journey and my experience, just, you know, for those who maybe are pregnant and wanting to kind of have some relatable content. If you're curious, you know, sometimes it's nice to know like, oh, I'm not the only one that's going through that, or okay, that is kind of normal, or just it's nice to hear about other people's experiences. And even if you're not pregnant or interested, in case you're just interested in hearing how it's going for me, then keep on watching. So in this video, I'm going to share everything about my labor and delivery, about my kind of postpartum experience, and about the baby, and kind of how it's all affected my life. I do actually have baby right here. She probably doesn't look super comfortable, but she really loves to sleep in this little wrap here. I can't put her down for her naps typically, unless it's going to be maybe like a 15 to 30 minute nap. And so I really needed to get this done. So she's here. And I thought, what better way to introduce her on this channel than in this video. Also, while I'm talking about this stuff, I am going to be doing my makeup. I will list all of the products down below in case I forget to mention what I'm using. And also, I did forget to mention that I did a Q&A kind of ask me anything type thing on my Instagram story. Just so you know, if you've watched my channel before and I've told you that I've linked my Instagram down below, I realized I forgot to change it in my default settings for my description box down below. So you may have followed my old page. I'm gonna link it down below. Make sure you go follow the page that's actually linked this time down below. I'll also put it right here so you guys know where to find me. Because I did a Q&A and I'm gonna be doing more kind of interactive stuff on my stories and on my Instagram and social media. So if you're interested, go ahead and follow me there. But I did ask you guys for questions, so I'm gonna be answering your questions on this in this video as well. So without further ado, let's get started. So the first question that I got was, how is your first pregnancy and delivery different from your second? This was the most common question I got, kind of how is the first compared to the second. If you are new here and you don't know me, I also have a 4.5-year-old son. So pregnancy wise, my son's pregnancy was a little bit easier in some ways. I'm not going to talk a lot about pregnancy because I did a whole kind of few videos on it, but I would say overall the pregnancies were somewhat different, but not completely different. I had morning sickness for both. It was just worse with my daughter. I also just think everything was a little harder because I was busier with life. You know, I wasn't able to nap a lot because I had my son, so they weren't completely different. It was just harder because I already had a child. I would say the biggest difference is that I gained a lot more weight with my son. I think being my first pregnancy, I also was not nearly as active. Having a toddler really helps you stay active when you're pregnant. And so I only gained about 28 pounds with my daughter, and I gained almost 50 pounds with my son, like 45, I think. So that's a big difference. But labor and delivery was totally like night and day, absolutely different. And I'll just kind of briefly explain how the delivery with my son was. Not great. It was long. It was mainly in the hospital as my water broke at home. I had no signs of labor, and then all of a sudden my water broke in the middle of the night. So I had to go to the hospital, and I didn't have him until 20 hours later. So sitting in the hospital for almost 20 hours was not fun. It was not comfortable. Now that I've had another epidural, I know that my first one did not work, at least not completely. I also was at different hospitals. I think that was a big difference too. I really think that the hospital I delivered my daughter at was much better. Had a really good experience with the hospital that I delivered at with my daughter. My son, it was just long. My body wasn't dilating very quickly, which is normal. It's normal for your second pregnancy, like labor and delivery to go faster. And I definitely think that that's true. Definitely would say that my daughter's labor was easier. I labored mainly at home, so it was a Sunday evening. I kind of had lost some of my mucus plug. The thing called the bloody show had happened. I won't get too into depth about that. There might be, by the way, some details that if you're not, interested in hearing about the labor part, maybe skip forward, because I'm not going to get in depth. I'm not going to be gory about it, but I'm going to mention things you might not want to hear, bloody show, things coming out of me, kind of gross, but it's kind of this video, so it's hard to get around, but I'm not going to be in depth about it. So anyways, that happened. So I knew things were kind of starting, but that sometimes doesn't mean necessarily you're going to have a baby tomorrow. It can last a long time after that happens. It still went on for a while, this labor. I think the difference was I was laboring at home. So this time, all of that kind of initial signs were happening. So that all happened, and then I went to bed on Sunday, and throughout the night had a few slight cramp, started to feel more crampy. I wouldn't say I was having full-on contractions yet, but I was just getting crampy, and I'm like, okay, this might mean something. Then Monday came along, and in the morning I was like, cramping's getting worse. It's becoming a little bit almost more regular, intervals, not necessarily full on 5 minutes apart. Sometimes they were 30 minutes apart. Then I wouldn't have a contraction for an hour. Then I was having them 15 minutes apart. They weren't super painful though either. So it was more severe period cramps, but nothing compared to what it was going to become. Contractions started to become more intense. Nothing I couldn't handle. It was getting more painful, but not like oh my goodness, I'm really in active labor here type thing. But I think this is happening. It wasn't consistent though, so I never really had it was 30 minutes apart, then it was 20 minutes apart, then it's 15 minutes apart, and they would go up and down. I would have them 10 minutes apart, then I would have them 30 minutes apart. So that happened for probably a good 24 hours before I was really okay, I'm in labor here. So I had a bunch of clients booked that week. I was hoping to get all of them in before I had the baby, but obviously you can't control that. And I had to, I was like, I think it's time to cancel my clients. I'm in labor and it's not going to get any better. It's just going to get worse. At the time, Monday evening, I felt like I maybe could have done my clients, although I don't know. I now looking back, I'm like, what was I thinking? You were in labor. No, you're not going to work. But that was just kind of my mindset. So anyways, I canceled my clients for the week, and I was like, sorry, I'll hit you up when I'm, ready to start working again. I noticed as Monday evening went along, things were definitely becoming more intense. I was thankful that I did not book any more, take on my clients, because things were getting more intense. Things were picking up for sure. So I would say technically, and this is another question, how long were you in labor? I would say technically I was in labor for 48 hours, but active labor didn't happen until Tuesday morning. Tuesday morning came along, and throughout Monday evening, definitely didn't get overnight from Monday to Tuesday, didn't get a ton of sleep. Things were picking up. I'm like, yeah, I'm probably having this baby tomorrow. It was starting to become a little bit more of that labor you see on TV where you have to kind of stop for a second. Biggest difference between the deliveries was definitely my water didn't break right away. So I was able to labor at home, which was really nice. I could lay in bed even if I wasn't able to sleep. I'm laying in bed and it's much more comfortable. I was able to, maybe if I didn't have a contraction for an hour, I could maybe get 30 minutes of sleep in there. But contractions were still not consistent, still about anywhere from 20 to 10 minutes apart. Probably at 6 a.m. I went downstairs onto the couch. Things were 6.5 minutes apart, and I'm like, oh my goodness, we're almost there. And then I would because I was tracking them on an app, which I highly recommend, because then you don't have to sit there and think, because you have to start the timer from the beginning of your contraction to the next beginning. So the gap in between is from the start to the start, if that makes sense. Not the gap in between from the end to the start. So this way, all you have to do is press a button when your contraction starts, press a button when your contraction stops. So it's tracking how long they are, and then it's also going to track how long in between they are. Things were like getting closer together. I was like, here we go. We might have to go to the hospital soon. And then things would be like 15, 20 minutes apart. And I'm like, what? So I was kind of getting frustrated. Things were getting pretty intense. The pain was becoming more unbearable. Like I couldn't talk to anybody. I had to really focus on being able to breathe through it because I was so focused on, you know, they have to be 5 minutes apart for an hour. I was like, no, it's not time. It's not time. Then I noticed that my contractions were getting longer. So typically, you know, when you first start labor, they might only be like 30 seconds long. As your labor gets, you know, further along, they're going to be like a minute long, maybe even longer, 1.5 minutes. My contractions were coming up onto almost 2 minutes long. And I remember my sister actually had her son 13 days before she was born, and she had a pretty, not a super easy labor. And when she was in labor, had contractions 2 minutes apart. And when she called the hospital, they told her, yeah, you should come in. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to call the hospital because I don't, you know, I want to make sure she's okay. Like, do I need to come in now? Because they were, you know, at least 1 minute and 45 seconds. So I explained the whole situation. And she was like, yeah, that's kind of common, especially when it's your second baby. This is what the nurse told me. She's like, sometimes things kind of, you know, spread out, like they're not becoming, the contractions aren't as close together, but they're more intense. And she said, typically, especially with your second baby, that means, you know, it can come very quickly after that. So she's like, it's probably better for you to just come in, get checked out, and make sure, you know, you might be ready to be admitted to the hospital. So it was about 10 o'clock in the morning when I called the hospital, and so we had to drop my son off. We went on our way to the hospital. So by the time we got there, it was about 11 o'clock. And by the time they checked my cervix, it was about 12. I was 5 centimeters dilated, which was, I literally could have cried. I was so happy because when I went to the hospital with my son, I was like probably not even 1 centimeter dilated. To be fair though, I didn't really have many contractions at all. I just went because my water broke. But just hearing that I was already 5 centimeters, I was like, oh my goodness, this is amazing. You know, they're like, okay, well, you're 5 centimeters dilated. Things are picking up here. So they're like, we're going to admit you. Like they had to take my blood, yada, yada, yada. And they got me into my room because I said I wanted an epidural. Like at this point, like I remember walking into the hospital, my husband dropped me off to go park the car. I walked up to the floor where labor and delivery is because, you know, you kind of already know where to go. Like it was like the typical movie scene. I literally had to like grab the wall. I couldn't walk. I had to like just focus until it was over, like the heavy breathing. So definitely things were becoming really painful. And then anyway, so I was ready for an epidural is my point of saying that. And I went into it knowing I was not afraid of the epidural because I was already 5 centimeters. And I think because it was my second, they knew I was probably going to move. This was going to move a lot faster than my first. Like they probably were like, okay. So because I told them I wanted the epidural, like I didn't even have to ask for them to give it to me. They just were like, okay, we're going to get the anesthesiologist up here. And I think that's what they're called. Long story short, by the time they got me in my room, got me in my room and gave me the epidural, it was maybe 2 hours from the first time they had checked me. I was 5 centimeters, maybe 2 hours later, and I was already fully dilated. So I literally wanted to cry. I was so happy because just the traumatic experience of being in labor for so long with my son. Like I remember them checking me so many times with my son, and they'd be like, okay, like I was maybe 0.5 centimeter more dilated, or like it took so long for me to get fully dilated. And like I said, now I know that I've had another epidural. My first one didn't work properly. So they gave me the epidural. I was in immediate relief. Like I was like, okay, I can breathe. And I remember with my first son, the hospital didn't really flip me from side to side. I think I was on one side the whole time. Whereas this hospital, they were like, you know, told they would flip me sometimes. And what I recommend is if you get an epidural And the way that they explained it is gravity kind of pulls the medication down. So if you're laying on your left side, it's going to help with the left side more than the right side. So let's say you start feeling your contractions on your right side only, then I would recommend asking if you can flip. And then if you have access to the button to increase it, if the light's flashing, it means you're ready and you can increase your epidural. So I took full advantage of that, and I would start to feel the pain a little bit on the side upwards. I would get them to flip me, then I would press the button, and it would help relieve that pain. So I did that quite a few times, and it really, honestly, I barely felt any pain at all once I had the epidural. It was literal magic. I gotta speed things up here because I'm only on question number 2 and I've got a lot to talk about, and I'm almost done my face. So basically, labor story, I'll finish that quickly. Epidural worked great, felt barely any pain, especially with the flipping. I actually had to wait for the doctor, so I had to wait about 2 hours after I was told I was fully dilated, because just with being short-staffed, wait, and then there was another woman in labor. So I actually had to literally wait there, and I felt like she was gonna literally fall out. I was told to keep my legs together. They're like, there was nurses there with me the whole time. So they're like, if something happens, we are fully qualified to deliver your baby, but we'll obviously want to wait for the whole team if we can. They're like, hey, maybe don't laugh, because every time I would laugh, it would feel like she's gonna fall out. My water like popped, felt so odd. And then after that, I was like, okay, guys, this is gonna happen. I'm like, I think she's gonna come out. They checked me. They're like, don't open your legs. We're just gonna kind of lift your gown up and check you. You could literally see her head. They're like, the slit is like this big and you could see her head. So like she was there and going to come out. So finally the doctor came. They were like, yep, you're ready. Let's go. They had a lot of students there, which I thought was kind of cool. It reminded me of Grey's Anatomy. I honestly didn't care at this point. Basically, once the doctor actually came in, literally it took no time at all. I barely had to push. So I hate telling the story because I've experienced a labor, super uncomfortable, painful, traumatic. If somebody had told me this when I had my son, I probably would have punched them in the face, because, to hear somebody has a really, easy experience isn't fun to hear when you haven't, but maybe it'll give some people hope out there that it's not always super, super traumatic. Now, to be fair, I still went through it with the contractions at home. It was incredibly painful and still very traumatic, and almost unbearable. But at least once I had the epidural, the hardest part was quite easygoing. Like, I remember my labor with my son. I was sitting in the hospital room, like, I just want to kill everybody. I was in so much pain. I was screaming and crying when I delivered him. But my daughter, literally, I was laughing with my mom and my husband. I had both of them in the room both times. The doctor actually asked if the student shadowing her could deliver her, I think because she knew it was going to be quite easy. So I actually, Bella was this student's first baby ever. So that was kind of cool. She told me not to kind of push, which I found kind of funny, but I think because she was right there, if it had have came out really quickly, then it would have tore a lot. So she was like, okay, just grunt a little. And I'm like, I don't know what that means. Like, how do I grunt? And so I laughed. And she's like, yeah, that works. So I literally laughed my daughter out. I'm so thankful and blessed for that. And it was pretty quick. And she was born at 4:12 p.m. Another question was, how much did she weigh? She was 7 pounds 5 ounces. My son was 8 pounds 13 ounces. So that also helped. And she's got quite a tiny little head. So I think that helped her coming out so easily. So yeah, that was basically my labor experience. Were there any complications you didn't expect? Not really. As I said, it went really smooth. It was meconium, which means she pooped inside of me. So when my water did break, it was slightly green, I think. That's how they know. And they obviously want to keep an eye on that, because it can, if you or your baby has a fever, they may have to administer antibiotics, which I did have to with my son. But luckily, I think she had slightly high temperature, but like within an hour it was down. So there was really no concerns, no complications. I had no tearing. Thank goodness. So the next question is, did I breastfeed, and how is that going? So yes, I did. I have been breastfeeding. With my son, I breastfed for a whole year. It went pretty easily for me. He latched well. She latched literally immediately. and has been an incredible eater ever since. She is a little piggy. She is my little chunky monkey. My son has always been a picky eater. He breastfed well, but I think he didn't eat to the amount that she eats. She's actually quite the puker, which I was as a baby. She pukes a lot, like go through 5 or 6 bibs a day, at least, changing outfits multiple times. Pukes a lot. It's getting better, but I think especially at the beginning, she was puking so much because she was eating so much. So breastfeeding is going really well. It was still painful. Once my milk came in, which was at about 3 days, I think 2 or 3 days it came in, it was a lot more comfortable. You do get like engorged, which means your boobs just like, they're so full, because they has to regulate. So breastfeeding is kind of supply and demand. So your body's got to get used to how much your baby's eating, and it will change throughout time. You know, if your baby's going through a growth spurt, she's going to eat more. And then if she stops eating more, then your boobs might be engorged again. And, you know, when you first start breastfeeding, your nipples, like my nipples were so sore. I highly recommend the lanolin cream. They just have to get used to being like sucked on all the time. And especially when you're first just producing colostrum, there's not a lot coming out. So it's like they're sucking really hard to get it out, right? Breastfeeding is going really well. It took probably a few weeks for us to get in a really good groove, for the pain to fully go away. So I highly recommend the cream. I would say the only complication I've really had so far is I did get mastitis. If you don't know what that is, it's an infection in your boob where it typically there's a clogged milk duct, and it will then get infected. And so I actually didn't even know I had a clogged milk duct because I find they can be kind of hard and lumpy when you're full. And because I was getting engorged at first, like before things were regulating and I was producing the right amount, I was getting really full. Things would get, painful. I didn't even know I had a clogged milk duct. I started experiencing flu-like symptoms. So I had mastitis with my son as well. I just remember feeling cold all the time, like freezing to my core, like painfully cold. And I didn't know if it was like my body and my hormones regulating, and like my temperature wasn't regulating properly. I didn't know what was going on. But then I kind of just remembered that flu-like feeling where you just feel like I felt like feverish. I felt like my whole body ached. I was so uncomfortable and like I felt sick. And I just remembered feeling that way. And then I started feeling around my boobs, and I did find what I thought to be maybe a clogged milk duct. So I had to go to a walk-in clinic because I remembered that I had to get antibiotics last time. So basically I got antibiotics and it went away within 24 hours. Like at least, like I had to continue the antibiotics for I forget how many days, but the symptoms went away. So that was really, really, like I felt like I was going to die. I did use the Haka, which I found helpful at the beginning when I was engorged. Like it would relieve some of that engorgement and like it would relieve some of the discomfort. But I personally really like my pump. I have the Mandela. It's like a 1 pump. I wish I had 2, but really I don't need it. I don't pump that often. I was pumping like every other day, sometimes every day, to get a stock up because I did go back to work after 3 weeks, because I'm self-employed. So I don't get EI. I don't get mat leave. My daughter had to be bottle fed, or at least have a bottle pumped for when I was working. But I have kind of stopped doing that. I have kind of taken a break from pumping because I have quite a bit of stock in the freezer and I don't want like that to go bad. So we're just going to use that. P.S. Why I've stopped doing my makeup is because I am going to be doing my eyes off camera. I have another video to record. So I'm just going to kind of finish up the questions. So my postpartum experience, because she came out so quickly, and I had to like wait, like because she was ready and because the doctor made me do it slowly, I had no tearing. So I wasn't super sore. Like things were still sensitive and tender and sore, but it wasn't super bad. Like I've heard people needed 30 stitches, like internal tearing. I was super lucky. I didn't get any tears. I had like normal clotting and bleeding, nothing to be concerned about. I would say that I bled for about 8 weeks if I want like fully, until it fully stopped. So I would say I was heavily bleeding for about 3 weeks. Then it kind of tapered off at about 3 or 4 weeks. And then it kind of came back. I would definitely recommend, a little tip, a stool softener. I didn't know this. My mom had to tell me this my first time, and then I kind of forgot this time, and I needed to use a laxative this time actually, because it had been, sorry, TMI, but like, this is a pregnancy video. It's sometimes hard to pass your bowel movements after. So definitely recommend using a stool softener so that you can pass regularly, because you don't want to get a bowel obstruction. I would say my hormones definitely were a little out of whack for the first few weeks. I felt more emotional and more overwhelmed, less patient. But after a few weeks, it definitely leveled out a bit. I would say I do have more anxiety since I've had her. I don't really struggle with anxiety that much, but I would say I get it a lot more now. And I would say it took like a while to get kind of the groove of things, and you're sleep deprived, and you know, I went from having 1 to 2 kids. Like, that's a lot more work. That was actually another question. How is it different? It's a lot more work. I require a lot more work from my husband, like a lot more help, I mean. He has to do a lot more, because especially she is a suck. She is a suck. She wants me all the time. She does not like to be put down. Now that she's old enough to go in her exerciser, I can get her maybe half an hour maximum in there, and that's like on a good day. She does not like to be put down. I can't put her down for naps. So as you can see, she naps in the wrap a lot. I've been trying to get her into her crib, but it's not going very well. She sleeps maybe 15 minutes, maximum 30 minutes in there. So typically she'll have like a good 2 to 3 hour nap in the afternoon if I'm holding her or wearing her. But if I'm not doing that, it's usually only like 30-minute increments. So even in her swing, she won't let me put her down. She's co-sleeping with me a lot. Initially she wasn't really able to lay flat, I think because of her acid reflux and puking so much. Like because she puked so much, I think it was uncomfortable for her to lay in her bassinet. So I did have her in her swing safely for the first little bit. And then now typically she'll maybe sleep on her own for a couple hours, and then I am pulling her into bed with me. And again, safely, like we're safely co-sleeping. I always said I wouldn't do that, but then you have to survive. And she's still, even when she's sleeping with me, I don't sleep very well because, you know, you're a mom and you're just like kind of on more alert because she's in bed with you. And she still wakes up at least a couple times a night to eat. Or she'll be tossing and turning and I give her soother. She's much more high maintenance than my son was. That's another question I got. Is she different from your son as a baby? Definitely. I could put my son in the swing. He was happy as a clam. Is that a saying? I think. He was an easy baby. I remember I'd visit my mom. He would lay on the bed and we'd just chat. Like I have to walk around with her a lot. She doesn't like when I sit down with her. Now that she's like more interactive, she's laughing, she's smiling, she's kind of cooing and talking a bit. She likes to be paid attention to. She likes when you're talking to her. So she's a little more high maintenance than my son was. But she's not horrible. She's getting better. She's quite the drama queen. She's a very, 0 to 100 real quick. Like she's happy. She might whine like once or twice and then it's like she's screaming. So she's high maintenance. She's just a lot of work, but she's beautiful and we're so obsessed with her. Another question I got is, how is my son with her? Like how is he as a big brother? Literally the best brother you've ever met in your life. He's obsessed with her. He loves her so much. From the minute we brought her home to even now, almost 4 months later, he has not, gotten jealous over her. I think he struggled a little bit because, and I don't think he connects it to her. Like he just loves her so much. I think it's having now a sibling, so it's not always about him, and then also on top of that he's going to school, so he misses me. So we're just doing our best, to give him as much attention as we can. So it's just a transition with everybody, and that's basically it. Weight loss was kind of the last thing I had on here. I definitely have lost the weight a lot quicker. I have lost pretty much all of the baby weight. Now I didn't gain nearly as much because I was a much busier person this pregnancy, and I think I don't sit down really ever unless I'm feeding her. Like, she doesn't really like for me to just, like, I can't just like sit and chill all day long. Number one, I'm working, so I have to keep the house clean, and then I'm getting Hudson to school, I'm picking him up from school. So yeah, I'm a lot busier of a person, and I would say that's a big reason why. I eat a lot. That's another thing. Breastfeeding makes me so hungry. I'm hungry all the time. I can eat a disgusting amount of food. I try to eat healthy, and I do eat pretty healthy. Like, I'll have a big, massive smoothie in the morning full of just fruit and veggies, and maybe a bit of yogurt. I will have big salads for lunch, but then there's also days where I eat out, and I eat a lot, and I eat a lot of greasy food, and I eat a lot of carbs, and I haven't gained weight. I've just lost weight, but I think I need to get on a better eating habit for when I stop breastfeeding so that I don't gain weight, because the amount I eat, I really should be gaining weight. That's kind of it. Sorry this video was a little all over the place. I had notes, but clearly they didn't help too much. If there's any questions I didn't answer, write them down below. I will answer them over on my Instagram story. I also am going to be doing some TikToks. I've mentioned this before on motherhood, and I'm going to recommend some products. You know, what do I find really helpful being a new mom? So if you're interested in any of that kind of content, then go ahead and follow me on TikTok as well. That is the end of today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you want to find out how this look is completed, then check out the video linked below. I'm going to be doing a look with the new Pat McGrath Mega Palette. So go ahead and check that out as well, as it's already been posted. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I hope you guys are having a wonderful day. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel, give me a thumbs up, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.